Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of Living in the Sprawl, Southern California's most adventurous podcast. My name is Jon Steinberg, and I want to thank those of you out there who had an opportunity to listen to our inaugural episode, where we took a look at some of the more fascinating neighborhoods within Los Angeles. And it occurred to me that this is a podcast representing a great deal of terrain that extends far beyond the borders of Los Angeles. We need to be looking at San Diego, Ventura, Santa Barbara, Riverside. There's a lot of ground to cover here, and this is not a Los Angeles-centric show. So I came up with the idea of taking a look at some of the more fascinating movies that were shot in Southern California, and they have nothing to do with Los Angeles. Before we get into the list, I did want to inform our lovely audience that we have an Instagram handle. It's Living in the Sprawl Podcast, and we will be posting there regularly, and we invite you to like and support the show. This is a mom and pop operation operating out of an apartment complex in the San Fernando Valley, and my fiance and I thank you from the bottom of our hearts for all of your support. Without further ado, we are going to veer away from the City of Angels, taking a broader look at the region as a whole, and in my opinion, the 10 most interesting movies that were not shot in Los Angeles, they're not set in Los Angeles, and they highlight some of the other beautiful, tremendous places within the bounds of our focus, and that is Southern California. So, we are going to do it differently than we did the first episode. It occurred to me also that in the first episode, we decided to count down from 1 to 10. This time, we're going to do it the other way. So, your 10 most fascinating films that have nothing to do with Los Angeles begins at number 10 with 1961's The Parent Trap. This will be the only Disney entry on this list, and we are not talking about the 1998 remake of The Parent Trap with Lindsay Lohan, Dennis Quaid, and Natasha Richardson. This is the OG version that stars Haley Mills, Brian Keith, and was directed by David Swift. For those of you unfamiliar with either the remake or the original Parent Trap, it tells the story of two sisters separated at birth who come to find out that they are, in fact, sisters and have been living their entire lives without ever knowing the other one actually exists. They find this out in the Southern California mountains at a summer camp in Bluff Lake, which is located in the Big Bear Valley. So for those of you coming from Los Angeles, this is roughly 2 hours east. San Diego, this is almost equidistant. So this is past San Bernardino, and this is the mountains. So Haley Mills times 2, they meet at this summer camp, figure out the identity of each other, and set about a scheme attempting to reunite their long-lost parents. The film then deviates a bit from the Southern California filming location trajectory and goes to the East Coast. There's some stuff here that was filmed in Boston and Northern California, some scenes that were shot around Carmel. But when the aforementioned scheme comes back into play, the film takes us back into Big Bear Valley to Cedar Lake. So both of the quintessential camping segments of the film were shot in the mountains up near Big Bear. And this is a region that has played host to a number of westerns. I thought about including the classic Shane on this list. Old Yeller was shot up in this region. Some scenes in Magnolia, Paul Thomas Anderson's phenomenal opus, were shot in and around this area. Again, I mentioned earlier, Brian Keith, who we will definitely highlight on a future episode of Living in the Sprawl, played the father in the film, probably his most famous performance, and he actually took his own life in a home in Malibu in the mid-90s. So some interesting things here. Definitely a recommend for families out there that are listening. And I found this fascinating that Walt Disney, the man himself, not merely his name or iconography associated with his name, but the actual human being, Walter Disney, had a hand in producing this film himself before he passed on. So he did have some notes, he had some thoughts about the film, and there are some signature Walt Disney things on hand here. So at number 10, The Parent Trap from 1961. At number 9, we head north into Ventura County, settling in to the bohemian town of Ojai, the setting of 2010's Easy A, starring the eminently charming Emma Stone in, I would say, the role that pretty much made her an A-list star. So everything in this movie was shot in Ojai. For those of you unfamiliar with the area, Ojai is roughly an hour and 35 minutes away from Los Angeles, but it might as well exist on Hawaii. It really has nothing to do with Los Angeles or San Diego. It is its own thing. It has a decidedly different kind of vibe. It's a town that you might encounter if you drove like 3 hours north of San Francisco outside of Napa, where a lot of, real bohemian artistic types reside. They eat a significant amount of kale and they watch their meat consumption in areas like this. Maybe I'm not doing the area justice, or maybe it sounds like I'm criticizing the area. I'm not. It's actually a wonderful place, and I had an opportunity to have a fantastic Saturday during the pandemic last summer in Ojai, where we actually, and by we, I mean my fiance and I, we had the chance to check out some of the filming locations from Easy A. So to bring some of you up to speed, again, this was released in 2010, directed by Will Gluck, and it tells the story of Olive, played by Emma Stone, who finds herself on the wrong end of a high school gossip controversy when she pretends to be more sexually active than she actually is. It's kind of an homage to The Scarlet Letter to an extent, and this is just one of the more charming, entertaining romantic comedies that's come out within the last 20 years. There's a really fun Stanley Tucci turn as Emma Stone's father, and Patricia Clarkson plays her mother, and Miss Stone packs all the charm in the world into this vehicle, and you can definitely see why she has exploded as an A-plus list star in the wake of the film's success. So some of the scenes on display in the film include a scene at Bart's Books, which I can personally attest is an outstanding outdoor independent bookstore in Ojai. I'd never seen an outdoor bookstore in my life before, and what do you know? Ojai has one, and it makes an appearance in Easy A. Also in the film, we get to see the Ojai Playhouse, local movie theater, and the Ojai Coffee Roasting Company, coffee shop. That has an appearance in the film as well. Additionally, scenes take place at Libby Park, where a more Nickelodeon-friendly version of Amanda Bynes holds a prayer meeting with some of her friends, and the Presbyterian Church. Both of those locations also make appearances in the film. Easy A, it's a great date night type of movie, something really fun to put on if you're sitting at home with brother, sister, and I don't know, probably they're above the age of like 12. I think this is probably appropriate for them. Just, a really nice, interesting, more creative teenage coming-of-age rom-com than you typically get from the larger big-box movie production companies. So, number 9, from Ojai, we got Easy A. Our number 8 entrant on our list of the most fascinating movies that have nothing to do with Los Angeles takes us roughly an hour north of Fresno to Bass Lake, to be specific. And it takes us into the great outdoors. That's right. We're going to be discussing the iconic 1988 comedy starring Dan Aykroyd and John Candy, written by the incomparable John Hughes during one of his really prolific periods when he was knocking out The Breakfast Club and Pretty in Pink and Some Kind of Wonderful and Weird Science. So for those of you who cannot remember this film offhand or you haven't seen it in quite some time, it concerns a pair of families that take a vacation to Bass Lake for some good old quality family time in the titular great outdoors. Feathers get ruffled, laughter ensues, and hijinks takes place. And it all happens roughly an hour north of Fresno. This was really the first time audiences also had an opportunity to see Annette Bening on screen. She plays Dan Aykroyd's daughter in this one. And from the scenes that take place on the actual lake to a restaurant scene at a local diner, the Big Surf restaurant, this one really highlights what some of the more unheralded portions of the state have to offer in terms of our natural beauty and habitat. Howard Deutsch directed this one, marking his second collaboration with John Hughes. They, of course, worked together previously on Some Kind of Wonderful. Howard Deutsch is the father of young actress Zoe Deutsch, who was in... She's been in a bunch of stuff. Why Him? With James Franco and Bryan Cranston. She was in Richard Linklater's Everybody Wants Some a couple of years ago. And this delightfully dark pseudo-comedy Flower with Adam Scott that came out a few years ago. Her mother is Leah Thompson, who I would hope everyone knows from the Back to the Future films, and perhaps less notably, Caroline in the City. But definitely a fun fact associated with this one. Anytime you get John Candy and Dan Aykroyd and John Hughes in a room, you know that good things are going to emerge as a result, and The Great Outdoors is a wonderful display of what a consolidation of talent can truly bring to bear on screen when it all clicks. So, The Great Outdoors, Bass Lake, number 8 on our list. At number 7, we salute the horror fans out there. Number 7 is Poltergeist. 1982 classic from director Tobe Hooper, Steven Spielberg assisting. This one takes place predominantly in Simi Valley, the Freeling home, the location of the titular Poltergeist is located in Simi Valley. Simi Valley is maybe 35 miles to the northeast of Los Angeles. It's located in Ventura County. Probably the most famous thing about Simi Valley is the fact that it's home to the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. But it's kind of a nicer suburb for maybe people who work in Los Angeles, but absolutely have no interest in living anywhere close to it. So this one, which is one of the few PG horror movies that I can honestly say scared me, is about the Freeling family, headed by Craig T. Nelson and Jo Beth Williams, as they deal with a paranormal poltergeist casting an ominous shadow over their home. It's the one, even if you haven't seen this movie, perhaps you're familiar with They're Here, little Heather O'Rourke on the app one. So with this one, I wanted to address the quote-unquote poltergeist curse. This exists because 2 out of the 3 main actresses in the film died untimely deaths. Dominic Dunn was actually murdered by her boyfriend at the time in West Hollywood. Her boyfriend was the sous chef at Wolfgang Puck's first restaurant, Mar Maison. And Dominic Dunn's father, of course, went on to a rather lengthy career covering a bunch of notable Los Angeles cases, including the O.J. Simpson case and a number of others. And little Heather O'Rourke the sweet girl who uttered those iconic lines, "They're here." She passed away at the age of 12 from a series of intestinal problems. Very tragic. If you want to pay your respects, she is buried at Westwood Memorial Park Cemetery, which was covered in our Westwood section of episode 1. Now, I'm not going to tell you the address. I will tell you that the home is located on Roxbury Street, and it is very much still there. The residence does have inhabitants, and I wonder, with locations such as these, houses that were used in iconic films that are of interest to a large number of people, do the buyers know? Do they get the price marked down at all? Or are they themselves fans of the films, and that might have played some role in why they purchased the property in the first place? Don't know. Just something I wonder about. Perhaps you do too. In any event, number 7, Poltergeist. For number 6, we stick within the horror genre, taking you deep into the Mojave Desert. For this one, we go out to Amboy for the 1986 horror classic, The Hitcher, starring Rutger Hauer, C. Thomas Howell, and a young, just off of Fast Times at Ridgemont High fame, Jennifer Jason Leigh. Amboy is probably not a place that you've even heard of. Honestly, I hadn't heard of it until I happened to drive by it on a trip to Las Vegas. So where is this located? This is roughly 130 miles south of Las Vegas and like 190 miles northeast of Los Angeles. This is the desert. This has virtually nothing to do with anything going on along the California coastline. This might as well be the state of Arizona, which, not putting it down, I went to college in the state of Arizona. A lot of love for our brothers and sisters to the southeast. This one has probably the best Rutger Hauer performance that we were fortunate enough to see before he passed away a couple of years ago. It's the movie, for those of you that haven't seen it, where C. Thomas Howell, he picks up a hitcher, and it happens to be raining, and it happens to be night, and the hitchhiker is not a very nice gentleman. He has ulterior motives, and he lets the young C. Thomas Howell in on his dastardly designs pretty much immediately after he is picked up. Then, after a series of mishaps and near-death experiences, C. Thomas Howell finds himself in the company of Jennifer Jason Leigh, who works at Roy's Motel, which has a Wikipedia page, so we do know that someone was interested enough in it to create the Wikipedia page. Jennifer Jason Leigh works at the motel in the movie, and unbeknownst to her, she is involved in this awful situation by assisting the clearly frightened young man. This is one of those movies that I don't necessarily think is even meant to have an actual setting. It's really more of a state of mind. It's exterior, desert, night, rain pours. It's not important that this is California. This might as well be Nevada, Arizona, West Virginia. The location is sort of immaterial here. You're in the desert. No one else is there. No one can hear you scream. And this is probably what makes The Hitcher a film that really has stood the test of time. So much so that a remake came out in 2007. This one's not as good, can't lie to you, with Sean Bean in the Rutger Hauer role. And Amboy, where the bulk of this movie takes place, is but one in a series of these towns and cities located in the high desert where, they will have a Rite Aid. They might have a Chinese restaurant, maybe even a Thai restaurant if you are so lucky. But it's real small town living. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this is the kind of setting that would not be completely out of place in a state like Texas. Nothing much to do with the rest of California, except for the fact that it is a fertile ground for psychopaths, such as the unnamed Hitcher. Number 6, The Hitcher. For For number 5, we head down south to my hometown, Newport Beach in Orange County. This is Beaches, starring Bette Midler. Wind Beneath My Wings. You might have heard of it. The portions of the movie that actually take place at the beach, this is one of the local beaches that I used to go to. This is Crystal Cove in Newport, and as Barbara Hershey, who's playing Hillary, is sick and trying to get better, but doesn't seem like there is a ton of hope, she invites her dear friend, played by Bette Midler, and they share a number of great scenes at the beach here in Crystal Cove. This was one that I always heard about growing up. Okay, before the television show The O.C., the movie Orange County, the reality show Laguna Beach, and it's interesting, I was just watching the Netflix show about the college admissions scandal, and that takes place in Newport Beach, and there's Dirty John that takes place in Newport Beach, and this new podcast from Audio Chuck, OC Swingers, that also takes place in Newport Beach. But when I was growing up, my father would just tell people that we lived in Los Angeles. I said, no, Dad, we don't live there. He said, well, people haven't heard of Newport Beach, so we have to say Los Angeles. But clearly, somebody had heard of Newport Beach and decided it would be a great setting for this 1988 Weepy. Gary Marshall was at the helm here right before he teamed up with Julia Roberts and Richard Gere for Pretty Woman. And this is one that I think all of our collective aunts love this movie. Mom's side, dad's side of the family, that's immaterial. Aunt Josephine, Aunt Sandra, they love this movie. And I love this movie. And it takes place in Newport Beach and has a phenomenal Bette Midler performance. How can you beat Bette Midler singing Wind Beneath My Wings? The answer is that you can't. So, number 5, Beaches, Newport Beach's own, on our list of the most fascinating films from Southern California that have nothing to do with Los Angeles. For number 4, we're going to keep it in Orange County. Notice that I didn't say the OC there because people that are actually from Orange County would never say the OC. See Arrested Development for making that joke long before me. We're going to take you to Rian Johnson's directorial debut. I'm talking about Brick from 2005, starring a pre-Christopher Nolan Joseph Gordon-Levitt. This was the one that really put Rian Johnson on the map. I just read that Netflix gave him $200 million to helm 2 sequels to 2019's highly successful Knives Out, making it, I guess, the Knives Out franchise. In any case, when he was growing up in San Clemente, California, I don't imagine he had aspirations to direct a film in the Star Wars greater extended universe or a series of 3 original crime caper throwback movies with a Froghorn Leghorn version of Daniel Craig. Anyway, this is really a great example of what can be done with a shoestring budget and a head full of ideas and a try-hard spirit. Rian Johnson set this at his own alma mater, San Clemente High School, shot a lot of it there, actually, and all of it in the town where he grew up. This is, interestingly enough, if you've seen Knives Out and you're familiar with said Froghorn Leghorn Daniel Craig detective, then it might not come as a total surprise to you that his first movie is about an aspiring high school gumshoe armchair detective played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who's trying to get to the bottom of a murder involving a classmate of his who is played by Claire from Lost. And that's, other than The Hills Have Eyes, I really haven't seen, I know her name is Emily de Ravin or Emile de Ravin. I really haven't seen her in anything other than this, Hills Have Eyes, and as Claire in Lost. But Joseph Gordon-Levitt turns in a terrific performance. Lucas Haas is in this one in super creepy form. And I know the folks over at Film Spotting were so inspired by Johnson's work that they named their annual Golden Brick Award after this movie. San Clemente home of the Western White House, where Richard Nixon resided post-presidency, and the Casa Romanica, a beautiful seaside venue where a good friend of mine got married. Yeah, it's not... Okay, coming from Newport Beach, as seen in the film Beaches, San Clemente wasn't a place that I knew a whole hell of a lot about growing up. It was just kind of to the south and in between Orange County and San Diego County. And that's where Richard Nixon lived. That's about all we knew. But now, having explored it a bit more, it does have a lot to offer. It has one of those really fun, quintessential boardwalk scenes straight out of, well, a good summer movie. As a matter of fact, nearby, you've got San Juan Capistrano, home to a great little Mexican restaurant called El Adobe, which was former President Nixon's favorite restaurant. Actually went there recently with my fiance, and they've got a booth, the presidential booth, where Richard and Pat Nixon used to sit. So for all those diehard Dick Nixon fans out there, get yourself to San Clemente. What are you doing? And then follow it up with a trip to El Adobe in nearby San Juan Capistrano. But of course, only do this after you've seen number 4 on our list, and that is Rian Johnson's directorial debut, Brick. For number 3, we turn our attention to an unmitigated classic, not a cult classic, not a fun indie, a bona fide, iconic movie. Some Like It Hot, number 3, starring Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis, and of course, Marilyn Monroe. This one comes to us by way of probably one of the most famous film directors of all time, Billy Wilder. 1959 saw the release of Some Like It Hot, where the majority of the action, near the end of the film anyway, takes place at the Hotel del Coronado in beautiful San Diego. Yep, we are going all the way south. Hotel del Coronado is a luxury space that legend has it was the spot where L. Frank Baum composed The Wizard of Oz. Definitely the place where he got the inspiration for the yellow brick road in The Wizard of Oz. It's a truly marvelous property. I imagine a great place for things like honeymoons or, well, no, that's really all I got. Honeymoons. I think it would be perfect for that. So to bring some of you up to speed, in this production, Curtis and Lemmon play musicians who run afoul of the East Coast. It's unclear whether it's the mafia or let's just call them gangsters. They run afoul of some gangsters on the East Coast, and to avoid having to deal with their angry criminal associates, they decide to dress up as the fairer sex and enter a vaudevillian-style traveling dance troupe, where they meet a beautiful young woman named Sugarcane, portrayed by the one and only Marilyn Monroe. In the midst of their scheme to hide from the gangsters, both inevitably wind up falling for the gorgeous young dancer. It's at this point that they wind up in San Diego, and Jack Lemmon is romanced by an older, wealthy gentleman, and ultimately their scheme does come to an end and their identities are unveiled, but not before the classic line which Lemmon utters as he and his beau are headed out of Dodge on the gentleman's boat. It's the part in the film that you guys have heard of where Jack Lemmon removes his wig, telling his pursuer, "I am a man." And the gentleman looks over at him, winks, and says, "Nobody's perfect." I don't know how well this movie's aged, to be perfectly candid with you. With a 2021 lens, I don't know that it would hold up to a great deal of scrutiny. But let's just remember that this was the 50s. John F. Kennedy wasn't even president at this point. Marilyn Monroe still had her whole life ahead of her. And a lot of things had yet to transpire in American history. So let's not be too harsh on this 1959 Billy Wilder classic that really does highlight arguably the most beautiful resort, not only in San Diego, but in Southern California as a whole, the Hotel Del Coronado, and re-examine Some Like It Hot, but let's leave the judgment at the floor. So, at number 3, the classic, Some Like It Hot. For number 2, we head once again up north into Santa Barbara County, where we stop at a quaint motel, more specifically the Windmill, so that we can watch 2004's Sideways, a personal favorite of mine and a really special movie in its own right. This is the one starring Paul Giamatti as Miles and Thomas Hayden Church as Jack. Virginia Madsen and Sandra Oh also make appearances. It's a movie that I feel as though has inspired tens of thousands of wine aficionados. Giamatti and Hayden Church, playing best friends, take a trip up the coast for a bit of wine tasting before Hayden Church's Jack is set to be married. Over the course of a couple days, they find themselves entangled with some local women. Some complications arise due to wine consumption and some poor decisions on the part of the groomsmen. After seeing this movie, I actually went ahead and read the novel. And fast forward, I didn't realize that Sideways was but one in a trilogy of novels written by Rex Pickett. And for those of you who didn't already know this, there are 2 books that follow Sideways. After Sideways, the second book is called Vertical, and then the third book, for some reason, veering away from the directional orientation of the titles, is just Sideways 3 Chili. But in any case, you could get through all 3 of them in a week if you so desired. They are extremely quick reads, and if you've seen Sideways, I think that you'll really love them. So this movie, which takes place in cities such as Buellton and Los Olivos, there's a scene in Carpinteria, some stuff going on in the Danish capital of Southern California, Solvang. Alexander Payne's instant classic makes great use of unheralded wine regions. Note that this does not take place in Napa, and I don't think I'm alone in this, hadn't even heard of the vineyards in the Santa Ynez Valley. But Buellton has the Hitching Post, which is a terrific restaurant that still does exist. I went there last summer, and a number of spectacular vineyards, some of which can be seen in the film. And what was once the Days Inn, where the gentlemen stay in the movie, where Sandra Oh takes a golf club to Jack's, Thomas Hayden Church's face and car. That Days Inn is now the Windmill Inn. And when I had the opportunity to visit, people were taking photographs, and sure enough, another Sideways fan in our midst. I think the Chamber of Commerce in Buellton owes a significant debt of gratitude to Rex Pickett, author of Sideways, and Alexander Payne, director of the film, for really putting their town on the map. Certainly not a place that I'd heard about growing up, not a place that was discussed in any circles, really, that I can think of, and is now a certifiable destination for people that have seen the movie and want to engage with the real-life spot where Jack and Miles had all that fun. So, personal choice, one that I love, and I feel is pretty universally admired. Number 2, Santa Barbara County's Sideways. Number 1 on our list of the best movies filmed in Southern California that have nothing to do with Los Angeles. Let's go ahead, kick the tires and start the fires, and head with Maverick and Goose to San Diego. That's right, Tony Scott's Top Gun. I'll be honest with you, I pretty much raced through every other entry on this list just so that I could get to number 1. I'm kidding, but I do absolutely adore this film. And I can't wait for the sequel, which I believe is set to come out summer of 2021. So hopefully we'll get that. I know it was supposed to be released last summer, but hopefully we will finally get it. So Maverick, Goose, Iceman, Viper, they are fighter pilots. So, of course, They are trained at San Diego's historic naval bases. Again, I had the opportunity to visit San Diego not too long ago, and I went to see the house where Kelly McGillis, playing Charlie, and Tom Cruise, playing Maverick, get it on, for lack of a better word. And this is at the home of Charlie in Oceanside, California. It is still very much in existence. Again, as I mentioned when we were talking about the Poltergeist house, people do live there, so be respectful, but the address is easily accessible online, and the house is still there. So kind of a fun thing to track down for fans of this film, and I know that there are a ton of them. One thing that I found interesting while going over some of the filming locations for Top Gun was that Viper, the wizened Tom Skerritt in this movie, his residence seems to be the Point Loma Lighthouse, which, well, would be the type of place that only a Bond villain or a tech billionaire could ever afford to call home. I definitely don't think a gentleman on a military salary could ever call such a location his casa. But lo and behold, that is movie magic on full display, and Viper's house in the movie is, I guess, the Point Loma Lighthouse. That is a very cool spot to check out. Yeah, you can go there, and it is highly recommended. The scene, my favorite scene in the film, where Tom Cruise as Maverick belts out "You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin'," that took place at the Lafayette Hotel in downtown San Diego, which is still there. I haven't been there yet, but I hope to get there soon enough. And more than anything, the backdrop of this movie is pure vintage, unadulterated San Diego. The ocean is ridiculously blue. You can practically hear the wind howling from across the sea. It looks and feels like a place that exists in Tahiti, not in the United States. There's this old bit that Jerry Seinfeld has where he mentions that no one can be funny at the beach. No one can be funny at the beach. How many real great comedic geniuses have ever come out of San Diego? I don't know many. The fact is, it's too beautiful, it's too relaxing, and people who live and work there know it. That's why you have all of the golf courses and SeaWorld, Wild Animal Park, things like that. And it's definitely why probably the biggest omission on this list, Anchorman, was set in the city. It's not on the list because too many of the scenes were filmed in Los Angeles for it to fall into consideration, but definitely the idea of Anchorman and a news crew in San Diego, yeah, you can get a sense of that by virtue of watching Top Gun, really. Just check out the beach volleyball scene, or, again, the scene at the bar with the Righteous Brothers song. That's pure San Diego. Not a ton of traffic on the roads, not a lot of angry people in sight. It's sunny, it's beautiful. Life is relatively peaceful in San Diego, and what better juxtaposition for such a setting than a movie about fighter pilots? Top Gun. I feel the need for speed. And with that, episode 2 of Living in the Sprawl is in the books. We want to thank everyone out there for their support and encouragement. Again, you can find us on Instagram at Living in the Sprawl Podcast. A website will be coming soon, so stick with us. And we want to thank everybody for listening, and we will see you next time on Living in the Sprawl, Southern California's most adventurous podcast.